Welcome to this week's Stranded with a Stranger. So this is our mid-episode episode. We have this in between our main episodes on a Friday, and this is your opportunity to send in your lists. Now, if you want to be a part of this, then please send in your list of 8 tricks, 1 book, and 1 non-magic item that you use for magic to sales@alakazam.co.uk. Please put in the subject line my desert island list. In that list, also please put a bio about you, your 8 tricks, and why you chose those 8 tricks, and we will get you on one of these episodes. So, yep, do get those sent in, because the more of these we get, the more episodes we get. That being said, now we're only, I don't know, like 4 or 5 into these at the moment, but we have had a reply to a previous episode. So, I'm not sure if you remember, but Scott Ratner sent in his list, and on it he mentioned having praise from the professor. And he said that there was a story that he didn't want to divulge. Well, he has divulged. So, wait till the end of the podcast today to find out what his story was and the reply. But before that, we have had another stranger land on the Alakazam Island. Today is Brian Lloyd from London. Now, Brian hasn't actually given us reasons for his tricks, but he has given us a little synopsis about him, as well as his list, but just not why he chose those. But that's absolutely fine. So, Brian begins. I've been into magic since the age of 9, where I grew up watching Penn and Teller, Doug Henning, Paul Daniels, the Pendragons, Siegfried and Roy, the Great Soprendo, Lance Burton and Wayne Dobson. I used to visit Alan Allen's magic shop and Davenport's every weekend when I was a teenager. I bought my first trick age 15, which was the Svengali deck. Great trick. At the age of 19, I ran a Marvin's Magic stall in Covent Garden, where we sold dynamic coins, Svengali deck, wizard deck, cups and balls, and the paddle trick, and the magic colouring book. After watching David Blaine's Street Magic in 1994, I bought the Invisible deck along with the Brainwave deck and Chuck Leach's Raven, all from Davenport's Magic Studio in Charing Cross Underground Station. In 2005, I bought my first Magic DVD from Alakazam. This was Carl Andrews' Table Hopping Cups and Balls, which used 2 cups. And not too long after that, I brought the Grail when it came out, an NFW by Gary Freed. And that's when my journey of buying from Alakazam Magic started. Long gone are the days where I walked out of a magic shop with the paper instructions and a newsletter in a plastic bag. Great, what an interesting past you seem to have had. Now, you mentioned Covent Garden. And Covent Garden has had a really long history of magic, and still does today. Obviously, we have Magic Corner. So if you're ever in London and you get the opportunity to go to Covent Garden, do check out Magic Corner. Now, there are the occasional magic stall there, but they tend to sell gags and jokes. In fact, some of my fondest memories was when I was a teenager. There was a stall there, a magic stall called the Magic Cave, and it was run by Lee Hathaway, Neil Henry, and you always had just loads of great magicians there. That was the first time that I saw Angelo Carbone, who was incredibly gracious with his time when I was growing up and helping me develop ideas, and, you know, still is just a wonderful human being. So there's always been a history of magic stalls in Covent Garden. So yeah, if you're in London, please do go check out Magic Corner, because there's some great magicians that perform there every single day. And you also mentioned David Blaine's Street Magic. I wonder how many magicians listening to this podcast right now remember watching that, because I certainly remember watching that. That was the first time that I saw the bitten coin, which was phenomenal. That was the first time I saw the add-on move, the pop-up move. There was so much wonderful magic in there. But now I'm just babbling on, so let's find out what Brian's top 8 tricks were. So in at number 1, he has put the Grail. Excellent choice. Now, I've seen Pete dem this at conventions, and I've not seen many people dem it, but I guarantee that there are very few that do it quite as smoothly, swiftly, and slickly as Pete does. And watching magicians react to this trick is just a joy, because they just don't contemplate that it can be that clean. And it definitely has to be one of the cleanest, if not the cleanest, card number that's currently available, because it's just so well thought out. It's great. In at number 2, we have Knock 'em Dead. Another great choice. Number 3, The Extractor. Number 4 is Random 2. Very interesting. We've not had that one before, but another really great effect. Fortuity is in at number 5. Now, the next one I had to do a bit of research on. So, Die-ceptive Do-plicity. Now, Brian has not put on here who these tricks are by, but in my research, the only one that I could find was by Stuart James, so I'm not sure if this is the same one, but it says, a prediction envelope is placed in full view while 4 dice are rolled. The total of all the dice are used to deal 2 packets of cards. The top 2 cards of the packets give a value, while the top card of the deck signifies a suit. The arrived at card is found missing from the deck and in the prediction envelope. So I'm hoping that's the one. I've not actually heard of it. I'm not sure if this is just one that's passed me by and it's really well known, but I think it sounds really interesting. I'm going to see if I can find more information on it. And do let us know if that's even the same trick. In at number 7, we have Shuffleboard. Yeah, we spoke about a version of this last week. It does seem to be one that we're probably going to have quite a few of, I should think, because it's just such a wonderful trick. And in his last position, we have Ultimate Wildcard by Jean-Pierre Valerino. Great choice. It's very Alakazam in there, which I'm not complaining about at all. There's some wonderful, wonderful tricks in there. His one magic book, Brian put Mnemonica by Tuan Tomarez, which I presume means, Brian, that you have a memorized deck in your little memory bank, which is always a great skill to have. One that, sadly, I have yet to master. And your one non-magic item, I particularly like this because he's found a slight loophole. Tall, Dark and Gruesome, Sir Christopher Lee's biography. So, he has taken 2 books, but one of them's a non-magic book, so it does get to go in the non-magic category. So, excellent. Really great list. Some really clever methods in there and ideas as well. And again, I always love having one that I can research, so Die-ceptive Do-plicity. Also, I should say, if you do want to check this one out and you also are going to research it like me, it's actually spelt die, as in die, D-I-E, as in a dice, a dash, and then ceptive, and then the second word is do with a dash, and then plicity. So it's die-ceptive, do-plicity. So yeah, do go check it out. But that's an absolutely brilliant list, Brian. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. And with that being said, we are now going to go to a previous guest who came onto this podcast and wrote in, Scott Ratner. So Scott has given us a reply. So if you haven't listened to his episode, essentially he spoke about a time that the Professor Vernon praised his magic, but he said that he didn't want to divulge the whole story. But very thankfully, he has given us the story in depth. So I'm going to do my best to read this out and make it as interesting as it is to read, because it's such an interesting story. And I bet it was great to be there when your classmates, I don't know if that's your colleagues, your friends, was there when this happened. I bet it was really interesting, but I don't want to give anything more away. So, this was the reply from Scott. In early 1977, I auditioned for and was accepted into the junior magicians group at the Magic Castle. At the time, the beginning age requirement for the junior group was 13, and though I was a few months shy of my 13th birthday, they made an exception for me. Almost inarguably for the same reasons I received complimentary words from Vernon, and I'll emphasise that those reasons had nothing to do with my technical proficiency or the deceptiveness of my magic. Indeed, I would say I was almost certainly the least technically skilled magician in the junior group at the time. However, the act with which I auditioned and was eagerly requested to perform there several times was not only cute, but strong in concept, theme, plots, symmetry, and amusing, if hokey, in its final punchline. Stay tuned for the punchline, I quite liked it. For which I will take immodestly credit. My dad helped me with the writing, but I came up with nearly all the ideas, having even at the time a strong sense of plot structure. The only explanatory contextual info needed here is that a little over a year earlier, the very Mel Brooks-style Sherlock Holmes parody film, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes' Smarter Brother, written, directed by and starring Gene Wilder, had been released to reasonable box office success, and its title was still fairly familiar at the time by the general public. I was dressed in a purple velvet wizard's robe, and my 10-year-old sister Linda, today a successful Southern Californian orthodontist with 3 young adult children, dressed in an oversized tuxedo, t-shirt, tights, and a top hat, was my assistant. The act began as follows. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Scottori the Wizard, and today, aided by my lovely assistant Linda, I would like to dazzle your eyes and baffle your senses with a few feats of magic, legerdemain and prestidigitation. At this point, I looked over to my sister, who gave a very deliberate look over to the left, and then to the right, and then gave me an all-clear signal. Ladies and gentlemen, please forgive this deception. No doubt many of you have heard of Sherlock Holmes' smarter brother. Well, Linda here is Sherlock Holmes' dumber sister, for she is my sister, and I am in truth not Scottori the Wizard, but that master sleuth himself, Sherlock Holmes. I then took off my wizard's hat, placed a deerstalker on my head, and picked up a meerschaum pipe. I am currently in disguise on the trail of my arch-nemesis, Professor James Moriarty. The rest of the act consisted of a small series of the most standard, familiar parlor tricks of the time, Professor's Nightmare, and What's Next spot card, some basic half-dollar manipulation, the Grant Temple screen, all used to illustrate my pursuit of Moriarty and his evasion of me and the police. For example, the Professor's Nightmare illustrated the inconsistent witness testimony that exonerated him in court, that kind of thing. It ended with the temple screen representing one of Moriarty's secret London warehouses, which was found by the police to have an entirely empty of all loot. However, I said, I am confident that the more careful investigation will reveal evidence of a long series of crimes. This accompanied my pulling a long string of knotted silks from the screen. At this point, my sister suddenly cried out, "Sherlock!" and then ran up to me and whispered in my ear. I continued, Ladies and gentlemen, I've just been informed that Professor Moriarty has been sighted in this very building. And then, exchanging hats back again, so I must quickly resume my disguise as Scottori the Wizard, and you, my dear sister, must return to school. School? What school? Why, elementary, my dear Linda, elementary. There's the joke. I quite like it. Cheesy, I know, but the audiences ate it up, as did magicians. The act was put into the junior group's Moments of Magic show at the Mayfair Music Hall in April, and I was scheduled 2 or 3 times as a 10-minute spot in the Sunday Brunch Palace of Mystery shows. After one of these walking out of the castle, I found myself face to face with the professor himself, sitting at the bar with one of his cronies. People have suggested to me it was probably Charlie Miller, but outside of Vernon, whose face I knew well, those were just the white-haired guys that hang out with him. Young man, he said, I saw your act. It was the best magic I've seen all this last week. This was witnessed by several people, including a couple of the other junior members, who were no doubt irritated by the fact that their pipsqueak colleague of obviously inferior talent was being praised by the great man himself. Even at 13, I was by this time 13, I knew that far from being the best magic he had seen all week, it was almost certainly the worst. On the other hand, on a certain level, I understand what he meant. After all, skilled as they were, what was the chance that my 16 or 17-year-old junior pals would be good enough to fool Die Vernon? My act was at least offering something that was even rarer than it is today. A magic act with a logical beginning, middle and end, structural symmetry, and a perfect comical closing line. Of course, I soon ruined this whole triumph. About a year later, I told my assigned mentor, Geoffrey Seymour, who was always very supportive, if rather wryly condescending, that I was ready to prove that I wasn't limited to that kind of cute act. At the ripe age of 14, he arranged for my request to have me scheduled at the Parlor of Prestidigitation for a mentalism act. You surely know about all of those highly credible 14-year-old mentalists. Of course, I can partially blame Jeff Seymour for what had happened that day, as minutes before I went on, he mentioned to me that Max Maven was in the audience. Well, the result was probably the worst thing to happen at the Magic Circle until the 2011 fire. 47 years later, I still haven't quite gotten over the humiliation. There were many witnesses to my catastrophe of the day, and I can only comfort myself with the statistical probability that a significant percentage of them, like Maven, are probably no longer with us. As for your comments regarding the Golden Age detective fiction, you're right, the similarities are abundant, with the notable exception that the mystery writer has the added burden of making the method or solution as satisfying as the effect, mystery. Something I'm not sure even the great Hake Talbot fully understood, though David Renwick seemed to, with Jonathan Creek, clearly emulating John Dixon Carr more than Talbot. When it comes to methods of deception, however, the correlation is exact. For instance, nearly every magic plot that entails the Mercury card fold is just a variation of the basic plot of Israel Zangwill's 1893 whodunit, The Big Bow Mystery. So there we have it. It's a really interesting story, and, you know, what's interesting there is it just shows you the level of people that would have been around you, and it must have been so intimidating. I mean, to have Max Maven there when, you know, you're 14 and you've got that show, and then you had Vernon watching your act, as well as, you know, whoever else was there. It must have been incredibly intimidating, so fair play for getting up there and doing it at such a young age. But that being said, that brings today's episode to a close. Thank you again to Scott Ratner for that reply. But our stranger, who is a stranger no more, was Brian Lloyd. So thank you, Brian, for sharing your list with us. Remember, if you want your list read out, please send in your list of 8 tricks, 1 book and 1 non-magic item that you use for magic to sales@alakazam.co.uk with the subject line, My Desert Island Tricks or List. And then that will come through to me. And then we can get you on one of these. So, that being said, we're going to be back this Friday with our main episode. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you again next week on Stranded with a Stranger. Goodbye.
Hello guys, I'm here to talk to you about Alakazam Unlimited. This is the best streaming platform in the world, I'm telling you now. With Alakazam Unlimited, you get access to over 150 magic routines. This is video performances and explanations. We have card magic, coin magic, kids magic, rope magic, mentalism, stage, parlor, impromptu. We've got you covered. All of this for the low price of just £4.99 a month, and you can cancel at any time. Perfect if you've got commitment issues. Yes, I'm talking to you. Guys, you are going to absolutely love it. If you haven't joined the platform already, what the heck are you doing? Alakazam Unlimited is a streaming platform that you need to be a part of. Not only that, there is also exclusive content only available on the platform. Check it out now, alakazam.co.uk. Cheers.